The network timestamps transactions by hashing them into an ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work, forming a record that cannot be changed without redoing the proof of work. Satoshi Nakamoto. Greetings, fellow Bitcoin aficionados, and welcome to another enlightening episode of What is Your Bitcoin Story? I'm your host, Gigi, and today we have a remarkable guest in our midst. Hailing from the picturesque landscape of Sweden, our guest today is none other than Ioni Appelberg. While his journey began in the halls of medicine to become a general practitioner, Ioni's path took a remarkable turn when he discovered the transformative power of Bitcoin. Through his unwavering dedication and passion for Bitcoin, Ioni has emerged as a prominent educator and content creator known for his insightful perspectives and groundbreaking work. Not only is he the author of the acclaimed book Abundance Through Scarcity, but Ioni is also the creative mind behind a series of captivating whiteboard explainer videos on YouTube, shedding the light on the intricacies of Bitcoin and finance. Join us as we delve into the fascinating Bitcoin story of Ioni, exploring his journey from medicine to Bitcoin and uncovering the wisdom he has to share with us today. Ioni, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. That's quite an introduction. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, it's my pleasure to have you on. As I told to all the guests, every guest seems to be very flattered by the introduction. So I try to do my best to hit it off on the right foot. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. And it's always a pleasure to have a new fellow Bitcoiner come on the show and share their stories. Without further ado, let's hit it off. Take us back right to the start of your journey down the Bitcoin rabbit hole.
Okay, sure. So I actually began my journey into money and monetary history through forex trading. And that was in 2014, 2015. And I found myself in this quite vibrant community of people wanting to learn about money. But I found the forex trading was very unethical and was a poor use of my time. It contributes no value. But in this community, people started to talk about Bitcoin, and I came across the white paper in 2015 through this community, and it piqued my curiosity. And so I read the white paper a few times, reached out to a couple of people who understood Bitcoin a lot better than I did. Then I essentially started to write blog posts, mostly for myself, to understand what it was I was reading in the white paper. And I came upon Andreas Antonopoulos' videos, and I have to extend my gratitude to Antonopoulos for orange pilling me. And well, I suppose that my background in medicine also had some influence, because as a medical doctor, you have one foot in the humanitarian sciences and one foot in the natural sciences. And I suppose having the ability to think holistically has been useful in a way, because how you think about something tends to be how you think about anything. And approaching Bitcoin with not just a logical mindset and not just as money, not just as a protocol, not just as a network, but it's something more than that, but also looking at how it shapes society and prompts individual transformation has been crucial for my philosophical perspective on Bitcoin. So I consider myself class of 2016, and that's also, I think I started making videos back in 2017. And that's also when I wrote my first article that later, it kind of was the first seed to Abundance Through Scarcity. So that's when I started working on the book. So it was a long project. And here we are today, making podcasts about it.
Amazing. So I guess it's interesting to hear, especially for the book talking in those terms, like how long it takes from your initial idea for it to come through to publication, which it was several years. I'll be totally transparent. I'm yet to still read it, but definitely after this episode, I'll have even a bigger incentive to dive down into it. But essentially, how did the idea to write a book come around? Because as you mentioned, you kind of wrote your first article, but then kind of a book's a much bigger hill to climb than writing articles.
Yeah, it was an immense project. It's the biggest project I've ever undertaken, far bigger than getting myself through medical school. I absolutely, you should absolutely read the book. It is a very good book, and I have invested a lot of time and effort and energy into it. But there's a second edition coming out now this summer, actually. I think now in May or in June. It's before BTC Prague, anyways.
Is it going
So,
to be available at BTC Prague, or
oh yeah,
that's too
absolutely,
soon?
yeah, absolutely. I'll be there signing.
Oh, amazing. Well, maybe you can sign both of my copies because I'll be there as well. So
Of
that's
course,
great to hear. But
yeah.
it's amazing. So how come the second one rolled out so much faster? I guess it's always the first one's always the hardest to get through, right? It's
Yes.
always a new
Mm,
experience.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The process was very messy. And it took some time before I actually decided that it was gonna become a book. I had a lot of drafts for videos and articles and blog posts. But then eventually I just started thinking in terms of writing a book. And then that it became more painful not having written a book than actually writing the book. So that was what happened. So I just decided that it was going to be a book. And I have written every word in Abundance Through Scarcity at least 14, 15, 16 times. I've rewritten it many times to make it read and flow well and to express my ideas clearly. Um, yeah, it was a really messy process. But then for the second edition, it was mostly just a much needed touch up. I removed a few ideas, added a few new ones, and dove deeper into a couple of existing ones.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, true proof of work, right?
Oh
As we
yeah,
say in
absolutely.
Bitcoin. Amazing, amazing. So, Yoni, I want to touch upon now a little bit on your kind of other spectrum of Bitcoin contributions on your educational content and all the amazing work that you've done over the years, especially with the content creations. From your perspective, what are kind of some of the most common misconceptions that people have about Bitcoin, and how do you address them in your educational content?
It depends on the context, but I would say that the most common misconception people have is that shitcoins have value. And well, addressing that, you would have to. I tend to address that by asking a few questions, such as the basic one: why does your shitcoin need a blockchain? What is it true? What is its true purpose? And if because when people engage in shitcoinery, it mirrors a lack of understanding for Bitcoin. Because what Bitcoin is at its root is the discovery of absolute mathematical scarcity that is leveraged as money in the physical world with a fixed supply achieved through a sufficiently distributed network where where consensus parameters emerges through social consensus, and that cannot be replicated because what was discovered was the ability to produce something that cannot be replicated. And if people don't see that, they think that there can be other projects as well competing with Bitcoin, that there is going to be this a Bitcoin 2.0, but there's no such thing.
We've seen a lot of Bitcoin 2.0s from Bitcoin Cash to Bitcoin SV to you name them. But yeah, I totally agree. Especially just to add to what you mentioned, Ioni, it's not just replicating something, but replicating something in the digital age, which is so easy with a copy paste. Like anything can be duplicated, and Bitcoin is kind of this first phenomena where something digitally cannot be replicated, which in itself is a true powerful thing. So I totally agree with you that thing should be kind of like a light bulb moment for most people. But I guess most people are too busy or too curious to find where they can get a bigger buck, right? Kind of my conception is that I wouldn't say everybody, but I would say 99% of people come to quote unquote crypto to make some money, right? Not out of love of self-sovereignty. And I think all that stuff comes later down the line once you put in that proof of work and study and learn about Bitcoin and kind of Austrian economics and everything. But in the beginning, everybody just comes to, to make some extra money. And then people just don't invest time. They're kind of looking, what's the next shitcoin? What's the next DeFi staking project that, they can get a 200% will yield, and before they know it, it's all gone. So yeah, I and what do you think, Ioni? Do you think this shitcoin is gonna go on forever, or there's kind of some point it needs to die out? Because how many times can people be fooled? As the saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. But in crypto, it seems to be people are fooled all the time and they keep going back to it.
Well, this space is still very young.
True.
If we look at 300 years ahead, people are probably going to be largely the same. There are going to be scammers among the human species, and wherever there is opportunity, people will be there. And if that manifests in the form of shitcoins, then they're here to stay. But it's very difficult to answer what will happen to the shitcoin space. But eventually, I think that a large enough portion of people are going to realize that they have no value, and they will disappear into the shadows. But there might be other versions of shitcoins, things we haven't even thought of yet. Whatever people can conjure to make a quick dollar, they will. But that's shitcoins have. I'm by no means promoting shitcoins, but they have provided a value in the sense that they have created some attraction in the early years of Bitcoin. People come for the dollars and they stay for the revolution. And with every cycle, people, more and more people, delve deeper into Bitcoin, and they actually start to understand what this phenomenon is.
True. I totally agree. Going back to the scammer part, when usual people tell me, the whole Bitcoin and crypto is all for scammers, I tell them, well, look, like let's leave this tech out of it. Scammers are still going to be here around, even if it dies out tomorrow, right? It's just as you mentioned, Ioni, like the scammers are always looking for ways to take advantage of people, and in this new early technology age, it's kind of it's so much easier because people are vulnerable. In most cases, people have no idea what's going on. They see some fancy website and some attractive words, and they dump much more money than they can afford to lose. But yeah, I guess who cares about what happens in the future with shitcoins? More importantly, what is your take? How do you see the future of Bitcoin evolving, particularly in the terms of impacting it on global finance and society as a whole?
Well, this is the central thesis of my book. When money is in abundance, everything else is scarce. And when money is scarce, everything else can exist in abundance. So over time, the cost of goods and services approach their marginal cost of production. And so the economy is actually naturally deflationary, especially technology, but fiat money doesn't mirror that. So what we today see as rising prices is not things getting more expensive, but rather fiat money bleeding value faster than goods and services are getting cheaper. So when money is broken, things don't just get more inaccessible to us. But it's also more difficult to get innovation going. It's only when we have absolutely scarce money, a fixed supply to represent the entirety of the economy, that we can claim a portion of the economy for ourselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We lay a claim to a portion of the economy corresponding to the value that we contribute ourselves in a Bitcoinized economy. In a Bitcoinized economy, you have value for value, and without cheap credit, zombie corporations starve, unproductive consumption ceases, and there are no more free lunches. So you essentially have to contribute value to get something back. So your net worth will essentially be a reflection of how much value you contribute. And you own a fixed percentage of the entire Bitcoin economy, meaning that as the economy grows, so does your slice of the pie. That is the Bitcoinized economy. And during the gold standard, when we last had hard money, we saw the greatest economic boom in human history. And now, in times of an increasingly fiat-based economy, we instead see decline. And you may ask why that is. And to understand how an economy is affected by its money, you must understand what money is for. Money is a fundamental human tool that arises naturally and spontaneously in every part of society, from prisons to kindergartens and in any kind of society. The reason is that we use money to coordinate our resources and the workforces, to have division of labor, and to collaborate across time and space. It really is a magical technology, money. But when this technology breaks, we become less efficient at coordinating and cooperating, and we can't really maintain this vast complexity that we have built in society, this extraordinary complexity. Meaning that when money breaks, we fall backwards into a less and less complex society. And when money collapses entirely, I think that the maximum complexity that society can sustain is something like an agrarian society. So money needs to be hard to be healthy and allow us to maintain this complexity. So now that we have Bitcoin, I think that we can increase complexity in society by orders of magnitude. And I have this chapter in Abundance Through Scarcity about how Bitcoin will not only prevent decline turning into societal collapse, but actually protects us from collapse, and also spurs innovation and helps us climb the Kardashev scale. And I think Bitcoin is an engine for us to advance as a civilization and climb the Kardashev scale if we look into the deep future.
I see. Well, from what you said there, it makes a lot of sense. Essentially, why we find society the way it is today. It's not their fault, but the monetary kind of system that's in place of easy printing money, and as they call it, the QE, the quantitative easing, the printing of trillions of dollars to keep the economy afloat and on a lifeline. But actually, I totally agree with you that there is, arguably for the last decade, there's no significant, if any, big innovation happening, and overall society is declining at a lightning speed. Whereas with all the technological advancement that we have, all the education, knowledge that is at our fingertips, all the connectivity that we have, talking about, of course, the internet, and now with Bitcoin, it's crazy that we're not, a multi-planetary species, but we're kind of figuring out what are we going to do tomorrow, which is crazy. Who would have thought in the year of 2024, most people would be, kind of lost in this world instead of working together to make the world and kind of the human nature a better place, instead of destroying it through the plastics and just being absolutely careless. So,
well, there's nuance to this. So I think there's reason to steelman the fiat system as well. The fiat system is it was a necessary step in our progression as a society, because we couldn't globalize without it. We couldn't globalize on a gold standard. We needed something that was faster and cheaper to move. So the fiat system absolutely served its purpose in globalizing the economy. But like, you can look at as these different types of monetary technologies as different types of rocket boosters that elevates humanity to a certain level, and then they fall off when we're done with them. But the Bitcoin, so fiat system has taken us here, and it's done quite well doing so. But now we see the downsides of the fiat system, and they are not trivial. And now we have a new set of rocket boosters, but it's not just Bitcoin is not just new rocket booster. Bitcoin is the rocket. It is the Bitcoin is immortal and final money. There's the very real possibility that we mess up the Bitcoin ecosystem entirely, and it becomes this Orwellian, dystopian surveillance system, global surveillance system. It has the potential for that if we mess it up. It could become something very, very harmful to humanity. But the underlying discovery, Bitcoin, is still there. Bitcoin is not the ecosystem. The ecosystem is built on Bitcoin. Bitcoin, the discovery, is still going to be there for us to create a new ecosystem around in another 400 or 500 years if we mess this up. But we have to tread carefully because we're not out of the waters yet. Bitcoin is still, well, the ecosystem, I should say, is still fragile. And I kind of lost track of your question. We were talking about the nuances of this.
No, but as I told you in the beginning, this talk takes its own way. You know, we can go off tangent, and it doesn't have to be in line. That my question was, how do I see it impacting global finance and society as a whole? But I think you laid it out, a very nice hypothesis of what could be, or one way or another. But I'm really interested to hear your take a little bit more on kind of how essentially Bitcoin can really harm us and take us in the totally opposite trajectory of being this mass Aurelian kind of system. And how would that happen from your perspective?
Yeah. So this is a question that is very important right now during the clampdown on privacy by government arresting the Samurai Wallet developers. It's a very tragic event, and it's not just an isolated event. It is the greatest attack on Bitcoin to date. I remember during the block size wars that I was pretty scared for the sake of the ecosystem. Like what's this going to turn out? And you sort of had to listen to people more experienced than yourself. And so that was scary. But this is worse. But as Andreas Antonopoulos says, Bitcoin is like a little gecko, and if you step on it, you're gonna have to kill it right away, because if you don't, it's gonna come back as a dragon. Bitcoin is anti-fragile. It adapts, and it's built to survive. The discovery won't go. It's not going anywhere. The discovery is the discovery is absolute mathematical scarcity, almost like a new fundamental property of the universe that we have discovered, akin to zero, but even bigger than zero, because it's something that has not just abstract applications, but very real physical applications. So zero allowed calculus and everything that came from that, rockets, moon landing, medicine, everything that we see around us is built on. We needed zero to build modern society. And now we have something very similar to it in the form of absolute scarcity. It doesn't matter that it's digital, it's just absolute scarcity. And that has never existed before. There's nothing else that is absolutely scarce that we can make use of, in the sense that we can make use of Bitcoin. And it is very important that we can maintain privacy when we use this technology. Because if we don't, now we have the blockchain, which is transparent and permanent, immortal. It is an eternal monument built by humanity that is going to be here forever. It is going to be our longest lasting monument, the time chain. And if the time chain is hijacked by evildoers as a tool for surveillance, which it has the capacity for, it could absolutely be used for that. And then humanity is going to take a dark turn. We are going to enter financial dark ages, because financial privacy and financial data is your most intimate data. It's the kind of data that says most about you. And if that is hijacked, then it's not good. And it could absolutely happen, because we don't have privacy at base layer of Bitcoin. It's just not there. You have pseudonymity, but that's not privacy. So we have these great privacy pioneers working on getting coin joins more or less mandatory for every transaction, where we now have technology to make coin joins cheaper than regular on-chain transactions. We have ZK snacks. We have all kinds of cool technology to increase privacy, but they're not at base layer, meaning that we have to build them into the ecosystem. And now we see governments clamping down on the Bitcoin ecosystem. They can't reach Bitcoin. Bitcoin is unreachable, but they can absolutely target privacy. But hopefully, seeing that Bitcoin is anti-fragile, we will now see more privacy solutions emerge. And maybe this is the kind of war that Bitcoin actually needs and is actually ready for. I am myself nervous, but so would I, going into a battle, swinging swords against shields. Even if I came out alive, winning, I would be very scared going into a battle. And but maybe Bitcoin is ready for this, and maybe this is the path that we need to take now. It's inevitable either way. All of these things that happen to and for Bitcoin are inevitable steps on the path to a hyper-Bitcoinized economy.
Oof, you took me and the listeners on a very deep and certain aspects dark rabbit hole, but it's good, because it's, instead of on the contrary of talking about happy days and sunny daisies, it's important for people to think about these things, which could be very possible. I also believe that in this new kind of fifth epoch that we've just entered with Bitcoin, this is kind of the next 4 years are the really we fight stage, because sooner or later the big boys are going to come after the ecosystem.
Yeah, this is the one of the known unknowns, right? We knew that they were going to fight us eventually.
True.
And I think it's kind of cool that we're seeing that now. It means that we are succeeding. It's on the path to victory. We cannot bypass this step. And just the fact that we see a clamp down on privacy, while the entire human population is waking up to the importance of privacy, is a very interesting time to be alive. And I am incredibly bullish on Bitcoin for this very reason, because I personally believe that we're going to come out on the other end with more light, stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just to add to that, I mean, kind of the DOJ, Department of Justice, that's kind of clamping, that did this big move on Samurai Wallet. And I believe they sentenced the co-founders to 2 lifetimes in prisons, basically following the Rolls Ulbricht out, which is insane, where there's so many high criminals that are just kind of getting away with nothing. But in my end, I mean, I think in your case, what you were saying, it would take for a kind of a one world government to really take an effect. Because if the US government goes all out on privacy, I mean, there's 200 plus countries in the world, right? And not everybody's coordinating, not everybody's going after it. Some countries are still deep sleepers that have no idea the magnitude that Bitcoin technology can damper on their own fiat
Oh
system
yeah, I live
and
in
kind
one.
of what we had due to thanks to recommendations of BT Chick. She enlightened our audience on kind of the deep sleepers that Swedes are, which they just go, whatever, life is the way it is. And Sweden's not the only country. There's a lot of them all over the world that are scattered. But on the other side, kind of, there's much more progressive countries, as of course the one that comes to everyone's mind is El Salvador. And actually, I believe you did a YouTube video quite recently. You did a trip to El Salvador, and not just a trip. You did a challenge of surviving on a Bitcoin standard for 3 weeks. So maybe
Far
we could.
easier than I made it look. Yeah.
So, so maybe
El Salvador is so Bitcoinized that it's not a challenge.
so maybe let's switch it around to the more positive side of Bitcoin, because some no coiners listening to this, they'll be thinking, wow, Gigi, you're taking us down a very dark route. So maybe you can give us a little insight and kind of what were your experience and what were your expectations going there, and then kind of what was your takeaway from the trip. I mean, you already mentioned a snippet, but I want to hear a little bit more kind of from your take of how you took it all in.
Just as a general philosophy, I tend to keep my expectations low and my mind open. So I spent about 1 week in San Salvador, the capital, then about 1 week out in the like in rural places in the countryside, and then my final week in around Bitcoin Beach, but an adjacent little village called El Tunco, which is actually more there's more action there, it's more vibrant than Bitcoin Beach. So yeah, what was my takeaway? Well, my takeaway was that the Bukele, the president, he is making a complete rebrand of the country. So he has done 3 things. He put in all of the gang members into a new prison, sidestepping the constitution to do so. And he reformed the entire public school system, and he introduced Bitcoin as legal tender. And for the population of El Salvador, first thing that they notice is that the gangs are gone. They can now move freely anywhere, and it's an entirely new kind of country for them, and that is what they see the most. The second thing they see the most, or have noticed since Bukele came to power, is the reformation of the school system. Then they have heard about Bitcoin, and some of them use it. Not everybody does. But ultimately, in the long run, it will be what will affect the country the most. So what I noticed first was basically that anywhere I went, I had the option to pay with Bitcoin.
Everywhere, in all 3 parts.
Yeah,
I mean,
basically,
locations
yeah.
that you went to.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Some people say that, Bitcoin isn't perfect money because you have to have some kind of interface to the digital world to interact with it. Like you need a phone, and what happens if you're out of charge? Like, or so what happens then if you don't have reception? Well, then I would to that I would say that that is not a flaw of Bitcoin. That's a flaw of the interface to Bitcoin. It's a flaw of our technology around it. I mean, you can transmit Bitcoin transactions with a message in a bottle or smoke signals, or it's in any way, in any creative way that you see fit. You can transmit Bitcoin transactions. It's just ones and zeros. But that is a question of time. We have to develop the technology around Bitcoin as well. And right now we use the internet because it's easy. If the internet goes down, Blockstream has Bitcoin satellites that we can use. There are mesh networks. But eventually, when we sort of transcend our current iteration of the internet, perhaps with the brain-computer interfaces, and we develop Internet 2.0, which is the human hive mind, when we can communicate telepathically, send transactions telepathically, then we are free of the shackles of the interfaces to the internet. And telepathy really isn't magic. It's just an engineering challenge. So if you go into the rural areas, like people don't have the same living standards as they do in the capital, for example. But what most people do have is a smartphone. So using Bitcoin in those kind of places is easier than getting hot water. So yeah, that was never really a challenge.
So not a single instance where you wanted to get something and you weren't able to get it. In every case, there's always an option, right?
There's always the way to use Bitcoin, but sometimes, like when you go into the supermarkets and you say you want to pay with Bitcoin, they sort of have to bring out some other terminal or like another phone, and it's not set to Lightning because their Chivo wallet, it kind of sucks. It displays an on-chain address rather than a Lightning address. It should be a mixed address, really. But it doesn't by default display a Lightning address, so you have to help them with that.
So you need to put on your education hat and go, let me.
Yeah. On a lot of occasions, you do. But then, like, you tend as a Bitcoiner, you tend to go to places that accept Bitcoin and sort of have a Bitcoin vibe. And so there are plenty of cafes and barbershops and restaurants and other places where they made a thing of being, they are Bitcoiners that have a business. And when other merchants see that, they want the enthusiasm that Bitcoiners bring, and to tap into part of the economy, they are willing to accept Bitcoin as well. And then there are these incredibly beautiful souls who go out and travel around the country and more or less build new Bitcoin cities. Like Berlin, a mountain town in El Salvador, is a perfect example of this, where a couple of people they've moved there and they have orange pilled a lot of places, and that now accept Bitcoin, and they're building a Bitcoin school, and more places now accept Bitcoin because they see that people go there more often when they accept Bitcoin, or rather when they have like a Bitcoin business. Everybody has more or less to accept Bitcoin. Then there are like traditional markets where people just ignore Bitcoin. So like those instances are few and far between. So I found it fairly easy to live on a Bitcoin standard there. So I could just go there to the conference, adopting Bitcoin, sell a few copies of my book, and live off the live off the money that I made from that, pay for my accommodation, pay for my travels, pay for my food, and yeah, just a circular Bitcoin economy, which is kind of great.
And how did that feel? Did you feel
Oh
like
yeah,
you were
that's
in the future?
just so amazing, so amazing. Gigi, I cannot tell you um, how good it feels to live on a Bitcoin standard. It's just, it transforms you. It's kind of like how people describe watching a full solar eclipse. Like they say that if you've seen a 99% eclipse, you have seen 0% of an eclipse. When you see 100% eclipse, you have seen an eclipse, and it does something to the human soul. It's it's a spiritual experience that transforms you deeply. It has profound impact, and so it is living on in a circular Bitcoin economy. When you are fully in a Bitcoinized economy, it feels cleaner. It feels, because you're using ethical money that at its core should not be able to be corrupted to steal from you or spy on you or fund wars. It's ethical money, and it's your money, and nobody stands between you and the person that you're transacting with. And the experience of using it is also just great. Using Lightning never gets old. And now with technologies like with multi-hop and the spoken hub and spoke model, um, transaction completion is virtually 100%. I've never had troubles with the Lightning transaction, and it's also private.
and
The
nearly
experience is
and
great.
nearly I mean, it's nearly free, right? Like it's
Oh
so
yeah, of course.
cheap,
Yeah, yeah,
which is another big
exactly.
thing.
Yeah, the problem that we have with Lightning is that you sort of have to understand inbound and outbound liquidity,
Mm.
which is a mental hurdle for some. And since when you're using Lightning, I'm not so familiar with your audience. Is I assume you have a sophisticated audience who have
They
some
do, yeah. I don't know
understanding.
if everybody, but they are familiar, and we've spoken about Lightning with several people, especially with Ben
Okay.
Ark. We went pretty deep.
Oh, okay. There you go. So, well, just the basics is that when Lightning is also a network built on top of the
Of
Bitcoin
course.
network, where you have a network of bi-directional channels, then where you and I, Gigi, set up a channel between each other, and we fund the channel with some coins. And funding that channel is an on-chain transaction,
Mm.
and then we can transact back and forth um, instantly, no delays, uh, in less than a microsecond, back and forth for free, basically. And but then when because the transactions don't really move, there's no settlement. Instead, what we have is a smart contract in the channel where the uh, where our back and forth transactions are recorded, like a bar tab. And
Yeah.
then when we want to settle the final score, the final tab, then that's also an on chain transaction. So there's an on chain transaction when when we open a channel and when we close it, and then it's a network. So you and I don't even have to have a channel directly. We can move through other people. So that's the essentials of the Lightning network. But the problem here is that you need both outbound and inbound liquidity, which basically means that you have your um, you need liquidity on your side to be able to transact, but you also need space on your side to receive transactions.
Mm.
And then you can, but if you don't have, say that you're like me, I sell a few books and I receive all the money, and I receive some money, and then maybe I can't receive anymore. Maybe I don't have any more space, so I need to widen my channel, and that can, in a high fee environment, be a challenge because it requires another on-chain transaction, and that is problematic with the Lightning network because it's it's not free of what goes on the blockchain. So if we are in a high fee environment, that can be problematic. And I'm not sure what the solution to that is. Maybe this liquid thing that nobody really uses by Blockstream, maybe that's a thing. I'm not sure.
I was gonna say, I mean, it's crazy in 15 years how far Bitcoin's gone, and already lightning what it's done in 6 years. I'm always a believer, and especially in the Bitcoin ecosystem where people really put their heart, blood, sweat, and tears into really being creative and living their best potential. Maybe another layer solution comes out, and another kind of parallel network comes out. Maybe liquid. Time will tell. Samsung
Yeah.
now is an extraordinary person, and of course the Jan 3 team, but we yet to see, right? Like the Aqua wallet just launched a few months ago. I see a lot of advertisements, but I don't see too many movements. But I guess everything good takes time. But yeah, who knows? Maybe something else will come out, because I totally agree with you, Ioni. It's kind of this settling the bill and doing that on-chain transaction when the fees are super high. It becomes very costly, and it's definitely not an elegant, and which I mentioned previously, cheap option, right? It's cheap to
Mm-hmm.
do inter channel operations, but yeah, I guess we will have to. That's the beauty about Bitcoin, right? Because there's always something to do. It's not kind of like in the
Yeah.
traditional world where kind of you get to the end of the project and that's it. You can redo it from the beginning. But here with Bitcoin, you're like crafting this Minecraft world that always
Yeah.
expands and always needs solutions to problems coming up around the corner.
Yeah, to just the idea that we would have anything figured out in 15 years is ridiculous, because it vastly underestimates the immensity of this discovery and this technology. This is an entirely new kind of economic operating system, and it's an entirely new kind of money. And we have never seen anything like this before. It is a major leap in the evolution of human civilization that we have discovered Bitcoin. We are now at that stage of civilization where we have made the discovery of absolute scarcity. Kind of like when we discovered the zero again, to
Mm.
reference that. We are now at that stage. Um, and to build the ecosystem around this new economic operating system is gonna take time, and we should hopefully we get it right the first time with a few hurdles along the way. But I'm confident that, well, I wouldn't say that I'm confident, but I'm optimistic, and I think that we can get through this first time around. But even if we don't, Bitcoin is going to be here in 700 years for us to build a new ecosystem if we need to.
Yeah, I totally agree. Essentially, with the Bitcoin protocol, it takes a whole different logical rewiring for you to consider new possibilities and find solutions. Because it reminds me a lot of kind of the Albert Einstein quote where he says we can't solve the problems with the same mind that we've created them, right? So we're kind of sitting in this kind of legacy markets, kind of this is the boom and the busts. This is
Mm.
how finance works, and then come along this wrecking ball. Bitcoin comes in, destroys all models, and then you're like, wow, like how do we build on this? It's
Yeah, yeah,
it
and
takes a lot of mental rewiring.
yeah, it does. Bitcoin is demanding in that way because we co-evolve with our technologies.
Mm.
Our technologies are extensions of ourselves, and so we build something, and that gives us access to new concepts and ideas, and we have to grapple with those until we understand them, and from that we can build on. So every technology is a bridge to the next kind of technology. So when we started to sharpen tools, like when we made the first older one chopper, something like I think was something like 4 million years ago, um, when we started doing that, and then it took another 2 million, something like no, it took like 3.5 million years
Wow.
to make the le voila point, which is the next iteration of crafting stone tools and spears and such. Um, because it took so much time for us uh, to sort of
Comprehend.
Yeah, exactly. Comprehend like the world that opened up to us with the old one chopper.
Hmm.
It gave us access to nutrients, to places, and another mental space that we had to mature into. And for every type of technology that does that to us, we have to evolve, and we have gotten better and better at that. So we are anatomically the same as people from 300,000 years ago, but we are not, probably not cognitively the same, because there was a cognitive revolution about 70,000 years ago. So if you took a person from 300,000 years ago and put them in society today, they would probably be, they
Schizophrenic.
would need special needs.
For sure.
And they would have difficulty adapting to our society, even if they were born into it. But so would we probably going into their society. But if you took a person from 70,000 years ago, we would not be able to tell the difference. They would be us. We are them. They are us. There's no difference at all. But try to explain to a person from 70,000 years ago how the Lightning Network works. Like, how would they even grasp the idea of cyberspace, a digital world that exists in parallel to the physical world, another kind of dimension in which humanity is going into? We are putting all of our work in there. We're moving our jobs into cyberspace. We're moving our literature, our music, our culture into it. We're moving our friends into our relationships into cyberspace. Everything that can be digitized will be digitized. And how would you explain that to someone for 70,000 years ago? And how would you explain computers? How would you explain Bitcoin? Like, they don't have the capacity to grapple with these concepts. And this is just a way of sort of in reverse explaining that we co-evolve with our technologies. And that is what is happening now as well with Bitcoin. We have this new technology that is kind of challenging to understand in and of itself, but also like how it transforms you is what is really intriguing to me,
Hmm.
because it puts people on. I think like it was a few years back that where people started to see that a lot of Bitcoiners start going on spiritual journeys. What is that about? Why does that happen? Why is this amazing cult of people all of a sudden deciding to take responsibility for their lives, start going to the gym, start meditating, start understanding, starting to understand what personal development actually means, and to go on this journey of ego
Self-discovery.
dissolution and discoveries, the ego dissolution and self-alignment? Um, why does this happen? And so Bitcoin has these psychedelic spiritual properties on the individual and society. And that is part of our coming to grasp with what this technology is. It is our all the one chopper. It is our new kind of technology that we as humans have to understand to get to the next stage of civilization.
That was amazingly put. And just to give a small funny spin on it, it took us what 3.5 million years, as you said, Ioani, to kind of make that leap to get to the spears. And here we are 15 years later complaining, how do we scale the lightning network, right? It's puts things in perspective.
Yes.
But you mentioned one thing which actually that was the next question I thought and mentally while you were saying, kind of, which I wanted to bring up through the explanation which you gave, which I found really fascinating and kind of deep thinking myself. Bitcoin really is kind of like this new psychedelic trip where, kind of, from my understanding, after a psychedelic experience, your brain rewires and you kind of never see the world in the same light again. And the same thing happens with Bitcoin. Kind of, once you really understand what Bitcoin is and the potential of it, you never see the world again. And it's kind of these two intertwining, kind of the next, I don't know, I wouldn't call it maybe a digital psychedelic. Kind of, what would be your take on that, since you already mentioned it?
So this is my area, right? this is something that I've given talks on quite a few times. I've written about it quite a lot. And the premise is that Bitcoin is an economic psychedelic. It is a psychedelic, not a chemical one, but it is a technology with very real psychedelic properties. And I'm not saying that just as a metaphor. Like people like Knut Svanholm and myself, who sort of have this philosophical take on Bitcoin and explore that area, like what does this technology mean for the individual and for society? And the area that I have been exploring quite a bit is the psychedelic nature of Bitcoin. Some of the things we say are purely metaphorical, just to gain perspective on Bitcoin, like saying that Bitcoin is element zero, for example. We do understand that Bitcoin is not a chemical. It does not belong on the periodic table. It's an idea. It's a meme. It's dressing Bitcoin up in clothes to see what fits. I was a chemist before I was a medical doctor. I understand the periodic table, and I do understand that Bitcoin is not element zero, but it is a very good metaphor because it explains aspects of Bitcoin in a way that is illuminating. But I am not saying that Bitcoin is a psychedelic as a metaphor, because it actually has psychedelic properties. Psychedelic means mind manifesting. And a few of the things that you will see when you go into a deeper psychedelic experience is that it holds up a mirror showing you the flaws that you have in the algorithms of your mind. It lays bare your flaws. It shows you where you have defenses, where you have thought patterns and behavioral patterns that are just part of your algorithms that are very difficult to escape for you, but may not be serving you very well. That's what a psychedelic does to you. And psychedelics also do the same to society. So when people take psychedelics, you see a mirror held up against society where everything that we have done that has gone wrong becomes blatantly clear, abundantly clear. And Bitcoin does the same. It does the same to you, and it does the same to society. It does so by contrasting the fiat system, by introducing healthy money that cannot be corrupted or to spy on you, to steal from you, to fund wars. It shows you that we have had narratives about the economy that aren't entirely true. For example, state control. For hundreds of years, we've had the false narrative that we need a state to control the issuance of money and just have a general control over money in order for money to have value and to be functional. Bitcoin shows that this is not the case. This is not truth. But we've been telling this. We've had this narrative for so long that it has actually become ingrained into the algorithms of the economy, so that it has become the truth.
We believe our own lies, basically.
Yes, exactly. And when we believe our own lies, they're not lies anymore. They become the truth. So if you keep telling yourself the same stories over and over again, they become part of your mental algorithms. They become part of you. And eventually you won't be able to escape them. They become your life, and your reality is merely a reflection of your mind. So the analogy is maybe you and your audience have heard of the snow hill analogy. It's a very famous and powerful analogy to understand how psychedelics work. So you can think of your mind as a hill covered in snow, and your thoughts and behaviors as sleds going downhill, carving grooves in the snow. And over time, these grooves become so deep that wherever you try to go, you're going to fall back into those grooves. And so, meaning that if you keep telling yourself the same story over and over, if you keep behaving the same way, your brain becomes wired for those thoughts and those behaviors. And this is something that, as a medical doctor, we see quite often in people with prolonged pain, for example. They think about their pain. Everything in their lives becomes about their pain. And so their brains become the pain becomes ingrained in their brains in a way that they cannot do anything but feel and think about the pain. The pain becomes their entire lives.
Even if the pain's not there, you're kind of just thinking about this pain.
The pain
Constantly.
defines everything that you do. It defines your entire being. If you let it, it's the same with drugs like alcohol and opioids. Eventually, the brain just becomes this machine wired to consume alcohol and opioids, or feel pain, or whatever it is. So, what psychedelics do is that they act as a fresh layer of snowfall to fill in these grooves, which gives you the liberty to explore new territory in your cognitive landscape. So now, for the first time, you don't have to fall back into the old grooves. You can explore other territory. And this is why psychedelics have such tremendously beautiful data showing how just a single psychedelic therapy session can cure otherwise treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, addiction, OCD, and so on. And it's not really a panacea. It's more that these conditions are not different conditions, but rather symptoms of the same underlying condition, which is a rigid brain that has developed harmful algorithms that needs to be loosened up. And Bitcoin does the very same thing with the human mind, but in a much slower and methodical way, maybe. Psychedelics are powerful tools to rewire the brain and to change your mind, to change who you are as a person. Bitcoin does the same. It first of all, as popularized by Knut Svanholm, you are your bitcoins. They don't exist anywhere. If you keep them in your brain as a brain wallet, they exist in your brain, and you are your bitcoins. If you take them to the grave, they no longer exist. They are dead pixels in the vast expanse of cyberspace, and they will never be reachable outside of your brain. So you are your bitcoins. And Bitcoin has this transformation on people where they start to see what is wrong with the world and with their lives, because it shows them an alternative. Like in the fiat system, when you mine fiat, you see that you have to work longer and longer hours just to survive. It's basically a time prison. It's a modern slavery. And you have the illusion that you have the freedom to choose, but you really don't. You can choose different kinds of tasks to do in the fiat system, but you can't really escape.
But you're still in a cage.
You're still in the cage. Exactly. And it's very difficult to see the prison when you're in it, but Bitcoin shows you the prison. Just like psychedelics show you your mental prison, Bitcoin shows you that you are inside a fiat prison. And it gives you a key to escape it. The first step is to realize that you are in a prison, that your future is being stolen continuously, that you are probably living under stress and fear that is inhumane and unnecessary. And it gives you the option to walk away, to and to start working on yourself, because that sort of becomes your prerogative. You want to Bitcoin shows you everything that is wrong with the world and with you, and you start to work on yourself. And this also happens with psychedelics. So they both show what's in your mind, and they show what's in the world. Psychedelics in the 60s, when they leaked into societies after very successful research into the mind and treating psychiatric illnesses, they leaked into society and became synonymous with counterculture. And this resulted in the flower power movement, where people started to organize differently because they saw that the way that civilization was moving is not beneficial for humanity. So they wanted to organize differently. They wanted to do their own thing. They didn't want wars. They didn't want politicians. They didn't want bureaucracy. They wanted a kind of freedom that didn't exist in conventional society. They didn't want that kind of conformity. And so psychedelics showed them that there was a way out of that. First of all, psychedelics showed them the prison, and then they showed them a way to do life different. Yep.
Wow, yeah. You took me on a mini spiritual journey right there with what you said, which was fascinating. And you know, your example with kind of living in this kind of slavery system, which is primarily a debt slavery system, where you kind of think you have your free choice, but you're always paying different debts to different institutions, and your choices are very limited. And then kind of having this, call it the digital ayahuasca trip, where you just kind of you fly out of this cage and you look down and you're like, what am I doing here? You know, kind of it's time to go my own way. It's truly remarkable. And that's what I also found fascinating, even from my own experience. You know, I was never really interested in a lot of topics that I am today, such as healthy living, you know, taking care of my needs, really putting family first. We're kind of really realizing, you know, if my wife and kids are not happy, how can I be happy? And it kind of gives you a more inclusive outlook to life, instead of, you know, just kind of selfish, which is kind of this capitalist system. And I'm not saying just in an example like in a family like with me, but as you said earlier, Ioni, with your El Salvador experience, kind of you always want to contribute to people that are doing stuff in the Bitcoin, kind of, you know, support the circular economy. You know, you want to be a part of that, because if you're helping a fellow Bitcoiner, you're helping everyone flourish. And that's what I find so powerful about it, which essentially Satoshi created the peer-to-peer cash settlement network. But out of that, it's kind of this Pandora's box, where the deeper you go, the more you discover things about yourself and the reality that you live in, because nobody really knows what this reality is. And well, today, most people don't even sit down to question it. They're too busy flickering TikTok videos and I don't know, watching Netflix and binging on some junk food, which essentially kills off your brain instead of stimulating it to be thinking and trying to answer these big questions. But maybe another topic, so on the psychedelic aspect, which kind of it rewires, or as you said in this fantastic example, and I never heard of this analogy of kind of this fresh snowfall that covers the tracks. It really does kind of initiate that this is all a simulation, right? I mean, simulations have been discussed for the last few years, and Elon Musk, you know, famously said that in his example, like there's 0.0001% chance that we're not in a simulation. What is your take on that? Because I'm sure that's also a topic that's kind of interesting to you. So what do you think, Ioni? Is this podcast happening in a simulation right now?
By definition, yes. I think Musk said that it's 1 in a billion that we aren't in a simulation. And this is, of course, the simulation hypothesis by Nick Bostrom, a fellow countryman of mine, who said, is he at Stanford? Oxford? I'm not sure. He's a philosopher anyway. Also the author of Superintelligence, and he laid out this theory, which gained some ground, not just in the um, not just among philosophers, but it became very mainstream. It's based on three core tenets that you have to dispute all of them, and if you cannot, uh, chances are we are in a simulation. But like we have to be careful with the definitions here also, because base reality is incomprehensible. And I'm not saying that as it is difficult to understand. It's literally incomprehensible, because you need some kind of lens to understand it, to see it. So we have our biological aperture. We have our skin, we have our eyes, we have our ears. And that is the interface between our brain, which is basically just living in darkness. And then there's base reality out there. But we have this human perspective on base reality, where we have this very narrow field, which is our biological aperture. And then we have our mental software converting those signals into something that we as humans can understand and navigate. But the simulation that we make in our minds has nothing to do with base reality. Colors don't exist in base reality. Electromagnetic radiation does not have colors. Our eyes make use of electromagnetic waves to produce vision. But electromagnetic waves don't have shape. They don't have colors. They don't have depth. That is something that our brain creates. That is not true of base reality.
Hence why we have colorblind people, right? Because if they would be there, everybody would see the same colors.
Well, my point is that doesn't really matter if you're a bat or a butterfly or a human being. You have a biological interface to base reality. And just realizing that should also make you realize that the base reality is incomprehensible. So the only way to live in this world is through a simulation in your mind. But that's not what the simulation theory is about, obviously. The simulation theory is the very idea that is the notion that we may have some kind of creator. And so I can't really recall the core tenets of Boström's hypothesis exactly, but one of the ideas is that if our descendants, or we ourselves, or our creators, someone creating a simulation, if we are not to create a simulation, we have to assume that it's because of some reason. Either that when we have the technology, we have developed into post-human beings that don't want to, for whatever reason, create simulations. Maybe we consider it unethical, and we have evolved to a place where our ethics basically just prevent us from making simulations. That's one of the core tenets. But if that's not true, and then we might actually create simulations. It's not a core tenet, but it's also an idea that maybe there's no. Actually, I could very quickly, if you want to, look up the core tenets if you want to.
While you look it up, I mean, from that analogy, but then most religious people do believe that, kind of our creator is God. So that does stipulate that we are in a simulation, because then God created everything, right? Which kind of outlines that we, even religious people then, to a certain extent, believe that we are, even if they don't admit it, living in a simulation. But yeah, it's a very interesting take, which I guess we will never really know the answer to. Where did we really come from? Humans will forever be asking this, no matter how advanced no matter what technology comes forth, in my personal opinion.
So okay, so here it is. Um, so it says that here's the core of this simulation argument. And this does not purport to demonstrate that you are in the simulation. Instead, it shows that we should accept true at least one of the following three propositions. One, the chances that a species at our current level of development can avoid going extinct before becoming technologically mature is negligibly small. Meaning that maybe civilizations don't tend to kill themselves. They tend to die out before they reach that level of technology. Number two, almost no technologically mature civilizations are interested in running computer simulations of minds like ours. So that's the argument that I had before. Maybe we don't want to for whatever reason. Maybe it's unethical.
Yeah.
Or you are almost certainly in a simulation. So if we can just extrapolate technology into the future, it seems inevitable that we would at some point create minds, emulated minds. So we are already creating ancestor simulations with our computer games like Assassin's Creed and Civilization and so on. Those are ancestor simulations. And now we are putting AI into the characters, not by any means making them sentient or having the ability to have quality. They have no experience. They have no awareness of experience, but they are intelligent and they can have conversations with you. But they are dead. But let's
They
say
have no
that
soul.
they have no soul. But let's say that we, at some point, actually find a way of creating loops, feedback loops to create awareness of thought, and that somehow, through some kind of emergent property, produces awareness of experience. Let's say that we are able to produce that, and we put that into those characters. The moment we are able to do that, we have created life in the digital space. And that should immediately make us wake up to the idea that if we can do it, what's to say that somebody isn't doing that to us, that we aren't the result of that? What are the odds that we are the base layer of the simulation? If we can actually produce awareness in the digital space, then the odds that we are the first layer of awareness is non-existent. So that makes reality fractal, which is kind of scary. It's an overwhelming idea. It's the idea that existence, that reality is just like a pearl necklace of universes, where each one creates the next one. And that's a frightening reality and an exciting one.
Yeah, I guess our listeners on this episode are in for a treat. Ioni's journey, how it started from Bitcoin and ended up in parallel universes, essentially in simulations. I totally agree. It's a very interesting yet scary question, but one that I would love to explore more and kind of, I find these things very interesting. And we recently had a guest on, I can't pinpoint the exact one, but where we discussed how today most people don't have these conversations and kind of thoughts about, things that really stimulate. It was actually a few episodes ago with another fellow author, McGood. We went on such a big journey. Let me come back to my buddy. What's his name? Eric Casson.
Eric Casson, yeah, we know each other, yeah.
Yeah, so where we talked about kind of, really stimulating the mind and kind of thinking about bigger questions. And these are the things which I find fascinating that we don't, have Twitter spaces about. We have plenty of Twitter spaces about shitcoinery and kind of what's the next DeFi project. But like, really grilling down into these things, it's, I don't know, maybe just personal preference, but I think a lot of listeners from this episode, we'll go down their own kind of rabbit hole and looking more into these things, because these are questions that people should be asking. And if you are asking these questions, you should be making big changes to your life, especially if you're living a 9 to 5, day job, which you hate, and you kind of think, life is the way it is. It's endless possibilities. And the more you question, the bigger, so to say, your mindset expands, and the more you're willing to take in things and kind of rewire everything you've learned before, which, once again, going back to the Bitcoin kind of journey, it really makes you question everything you've been taught all the way back from kindergarten, how society is, how life is. Of course, even money, but money is not taught in schools, which is funny.
Yeah, which is weird. And if you feel that you lack a tribe or community, which I did, start going to conferences, start going to Bitcoin conferences. Best decision of my life. They're truly wonderful, and you find your tribe. So now my best friends are now Bitcoiners. They are the people that I see at conferences, and I see them maybe 5 times a year, which is actually more than I see my regular friends now, or my friends outside of the Bitcoin space, which is kind of amazing. So I've decentralized it's a decentralized tribe that we have, which is and it's the best people. It's the best people in the world, and so there you'll have your stimulating conversations for sure. And the reason we aren't as loud and as vocal, perhaps, as shitcoin communities online, I think is because Bitcoiners build and win in silence.
That's true. And I guess if you would go public with a lot of these things, people will either not take you serious, or they think you're totally crazy, because they're so delusional in their own kind of belief of what, kind of the way the world is. But I would just love to add on which you just mentioned, Ioni. Definitely conferences is a big recommendation for everybody to go, because you meet very like-minded people. Conversations are very easy, and you never know who you will meet. Maybe you'll meet your next business partner, and you can leave that 9 to 5 job, which I was just saying a few minutes ago. And on the topic of conferences, of course, many of our listeners are already aware, but any new listeners that are listening to this episode, arguably one of the best, especially European conferences, is coming up in just 4 weeks' time, or 5 weeks' time in Prague, BTC Prague, where there's going to be over 10,000 different people of beautiful minds colliding, some fantastic educational content, some great speakers, a lot of companies that you can, freely go speak to and see where you can contribute in whatever way, design ways, technical ways, emotional ways. There's so many things that you can provide in the space and help everybody evolve, that you should definitely take the leap. And if for whatever reason you haven't seen our promotions, you can even use the BTC Story promo code and get a 10% discount and get a little bit of saving. But that's not the point. The point is to take the courage and pull the trigger and make your way down to the conference. If you haven't, BTC Prague is a fantastic one to start off with. If you're in other parts of the world, if you're in North or Latin America, definitely adopting Bitcoin conference. Ioni, we just mentioned, in El Salvador. And there's a lot of other smaller ones which have been going for years, such as the Baltic Honey Badger is also a fantastic one. This or Plan B in Lugano. There's a lot of them. The most important thing is to make that first step.
Madeira is beautiful.
And Madeira, of course.
Yeah.
Which it was on my plans to go to that one, but actually the dates, I believe it was 1st of March this year. That was actually my eldest daughter's birthday, and she was born in a leap year. She was born on 29th of February 2020. So there was no way I could have skipped that one. So unfortunately, I couldn't come to this year in Madeira, but everything I've seen afterwards was, I got the full-blown FOMO of not being there. So next year for sure.
Yeah, it was truly amazing. A true peak experience for me. And BTC Prague is up next. I'll be doing a talk on Bitcoin is Kardashev Type 1 money on DevHack Day, which is the day before the actual conference on the 12th of June. So come by, say hi. I'll be signing books throughout the event as well.
Well, you will certainly see Gigi come there, come through, zap you some lightnings for the 2 copies, and get your signature on it. It would be amazing. I did the same thing with Eric Kaysen's crypto sovereignty book last October in Amsterdam, and Jimmy Song's Fiat Ruins Everything, and who was it? And Jason Mayer also with his progressive case for Bitcoin. So we need to add another orange book to the collection, and I guess your 2 copies will be next, which I'm really looking forward to. And yeah, just generally, guys, the takeaway. I usually finish the podcast episodes on asking the guests on what is one piece of advice you would give to someone looking to get started in Bitcoin. But I guess in this episode, there's been so many kind of gems and takeaways that people can take away from entering the space. But I guess to conclude it, the advice would be go to the conference and meet the people. Learning all in isolation on your YouTube universe is fun and all, but going to actual and interacting with people, and us humans, we are social creatures. And once you bring that to the real life and you explore and you bring up these questions to other communities, to the community of people that are there on the same wavelength as you, it's a truly beautiful experience, and it truly feels timeless, at least to me. And I'm sure Ioni, you can relate to that.
Yeah, sure. And I can also add to that today most people live lives of quiet desperation, and don't be afraid to acknowledge that if there's something that doesn't feel quite right about your life or your job, it's probably because that is so. And if you don't allow yourself to feel the pain is never going to reach the threshold where you actually take action to change your life. So don't be afraid to walk into the pain and see it clearly. Hold up that mirror and to your life, and actually look at yourself, look at your life, look at your job. And this is the one shot you get. Be courageous. Take the leap.
Embrace pain, because you need to. People tend to be too comfortable with lives, and they don't like to confront harsh realities where, if you do, to be honest, it's a short pain for a short period of time for a beautiful, abundant life that you can truly live. But I think that's fantastic advice to confront it head first and make the change. Amazing. Ioni, so I guess the last question I would ask you is, where can we send our listeners who have just been introduced to you, and I'm sure they would love to follow you online and all the incredible work that you're doing? What's the best place that we can send them to?
So I'm most active on Twitter, on X, under my handle is Ioni Appelberg, IONIAPPELBERG, Ioni Appelberg, and same on YouTube. Just have a look at my videos there. I'm actually going to be working on a new series now, together with Knut Svanholm and Guy Swan and Luke the Wolf. So it's 4 of us now. Going to be working on a new YouTube series.
The Wolf Pack.
The Wolf Pack. Yeah, so we're going to be publishing videos.
Amazing.
Hopefully about one video a month or something like that. I'm not sure. Hopefully even quicker. But I'm also writing a new book. So there's
And you drop incredible wisdom every day on X. I can be an alibi of that. I love seeing the daily post of Ioni with stimulating your Bitcoin brain. So
I've made myself a promise to make 1 post a day.
I see that, and I can confirm it's consistent. Every day there's something that kind of trickles your brain into thinking, which thank you for doing that and contributing.
Well, thank you for recognizing that.
Well, and the last thing, I guess, guys, if you haven't, just like myself, you better go and get yourself a copy from Abundance Through Scarcity. I think you will find it a very insightful read. And if you want to be lucky enough to get it signed by the man himself, then you better make your trip down to Prague next month in June. Once again, I would like to thank you so much, Ioni, for coming on the podcast. We haven't actually met in physical presence prior to this, but I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person in a few weeks' time. Yeah, whenever the next book is out, or whenever you want to come on the show and discuss some other very mind-tickling topics, the invitation's always open, and would love to have you back. Yep, wishing you all the best with the new developments of the second book, getting that finalized, and of course the new quote unquote wolf pack that you're doing with amazing guys in the space with the YouTube series. I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, we're looking forward to having you back in the future.
Thank you, man. This has been great.